those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to this review episode of the Wild Eye Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to pinnacle entertainment savage worlds aimed at beginners and veterans alike. Got my good friend Uncle Jay to review something for us.
Thanks, Eric. And that's true. I am your good friend. Let the world know that I am a good friend to Eric. He does have friends. Just everybody knows, man. I'm a good friend to him.
Yeah, not just a friend, a good one. So
correct, good friend. So how's it going, Eric?
Pretty good. Good weekend so far. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. I'm on call, and I'm just, I haven't had any pages so far, so it's been pretty good. So I'm lucky about that, because as soon as that phone rings, I sort of get like PTSD. I'm like, geez, got to go run and get to the computer. So everything's good right now. So I'm lucky. It's been a good weekend so far.
That's awesome. So what are we reviewing today? Well, what are you reviewing, basically?
Well, today you brought me on here to talk about the new setting from the Up to 4 Players gang, and that's the Crystal Heart. It's the setting that all the kids are talking about, I believe, or some of the kids or whatever. It had a pretty successful Kickstarter, and so I actually didn't back it, but I decided to pick it up on the the Christmas and July sale last month that Drive Through RPG had. So I picked it up on sale and I took a look at it, and you invited me on here to talk about it. So here I am.
Yeah, that's right. So I was supposed to review 7 Worlds this month, but it's a thick book to get through, and I've been busy, and yeah, I happened to listen to Uncle Jay review Crystal Heart on the Murder Hobo show. And I'm like, well, this is one of the first, if not the first, setting for SWADE out. Mm-hmm. So I thought it'd be good to go through that. Plus, the people at Up to 4 Players asked me if we could do a review. So perfect. So Uncle Jay to the rescue with Crystal Heart. So we're going to dive right into it with Between the Covers with Uncle Jay, my good friend.
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, one and all, to Between the Covers, the hottest and most greased up segment on this podcast. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Things are gonna get a bit weird in here.
No, it's nothing sexy.
Sorry, what?
It's kind of where we talk about a Savage Worlds book from cover to cover.
Like some sort of book club?
Well, essentially, yes.
Well, in that case, I'm leaving. Oh, yeah. See you later.
All right, so Jay, I've been following what Up to 4 Players have been up to for quite a while now. They're the ones doing that web comic, basically explaining. This is their own way of explaining how the rules work with the little comic, and it takes place in the setting that we're going to talk about. Basically, they started out with the comics, and it evolved into a full-blown setting, Kickstarter campaign. But one thing that I've always kind of, I wouldn't say struggle with, but maybe give us a little, in a nutshell type of thing. What kind of campaign setting is it? Is it fantasy? Is it kind of supers? Barovia? That sounds like Barovia. And Ravenloft? What is it?
I'd say you're correct in saying it's all of those things, Eric. I would say it's an approximation. It's sort of the best way I can explain it. It takes the best of all of those elements: post-apocalyptic setting, fantasy setting, science fiction setting, and even a super setting. In fact, I think the only thing that we don't, in fact, if you want to even delve a little further into it, you might even go as far to say there's a little bit of horror in this too, if you wanted to go that route. No, it's not so much on the surface. That's a deeper dive into the setting, but on the surface, you get all of those. So I would say it's an amalgamation or a nice little mixture of all of those sort of things too, where it takes place. It talks about it takes place. The setting itself, it takes place 800 years past something called the bygone era, when there was a bunch of I guess I want to say the technology was, I guess, more incredible. And it looks like there might have been there wasn't so much magic elements or whatever, but it looks like this technology was almost so heightened to the fact that it almost resembled magic, if that makes sense.
All right, so there is a certain level of technology in there that you can encounter, or is it just basically artifacts by now because it takes place after that empire fell, probably?
Right. Yeah, in fact, that's what this is about. You're sort of you're an agent that works for an organization called SIN. And SIN is the only organization that has been able to harness these crystals that is out in the world. And these crystals are sort of these artifacts, to use your phrase, artifacts of immense power. And they can influence an entire region or an entire community. And so SIN, this organization, sends the players, the SIN hunters, out to go and retrieve these crystals. And not to mention the fact, and I think the one thing that we have to mention here at the beginning, we were talking about we're just talking about as far as like genres goes. That's sort of that in a nutshell. That's what it is. In a nutshell, it's science fantasy super, science fantasy supers, sci-fi soups. Sci-fi fan soups. That's what it is.
Fan soup. I like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at the book. I mean, it looks pretty good. The layout is really well done. Easy to read. A lot of illustrations in there, and in the same style as the comics. So if you're a fan of that, I mean, there's probably well over 100 illustrations in there. Very cool stuff. And 216 pages. That's the smaller graphic novel format, I think. So there's still a lot of meat to that book. Mm-hmm. And we're going to go over chapter by chapter to see what you find in this book. So, well, at first it looks like some kind of introduction really about the world, right? And which is basically what you just described.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fair. In fact, I was about to start getting into it a little bit farther, but then I just decided to look back because we wanted to go through it chapter by chapter. I didn't want to just dump the whole wad right there at the beginning, go blah, 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 blah. Okay, we're done. No, we need to break this down in order. So yeah, this goes on to explain exactly what the Crystal Heart setting is about. The premise is after this bygone era, human beings, they don't have a blood and flesh heart, as we do now. At least some of us do now. I've heard rumors that you might not have one as it stands, but I don't think that's true. That's just what the guys tell me, but I don't believe them. I don't believe in those nasty rumors that people say about you. I believe that you have a nice, fine heart that works functionally. That's just me.
Thank you. I won't deny nor confirm those rumors.
Okay. All right. So we'll just put that out on the table. Eric, I believe that Eric has a heart. That's for everybody else to determine. But here in this setting, though, in Crystal Heart, human beings are born with essentially a little colorless little stone instead of a heart. Why is that? It kind of, you kind of wonder why that is, in the fact, and it does break that down a little farther that I don't want, that you can read about. But as it stands right now, human beings don't have a heart as, per se, that it actually evolves sort of, as they grow. The experiences and memories and accumulation of knowledge sort of make your heart grow into this crystal form as you get older. and so that's sort of what happens. But the Sin organization, they found out a way to implant a harness inside of your chest and to replace your heart, in fact, and implant it with one of these crystals. And when we talked about these crystals are like these powerful little artifacts that are out there in the world. And they've been recently just uncontrolled and untamed, and they've been let in the wilderness. Until recently, I'd say roughly about 30 years, they've been able to harness, this organization Sin's been able to harness this power within the Sin agent, and they've been out sending these agents out to retrieve these crystals. And so it goes down. It goes on to say about. It goes on to talk about, how long the crystals have been around, and it says that they've been around for at least 800 years, and they can be found in like ancient structures. So they are indeed, artifacts from a bygone era. Now, the thing about it is you can't just let a crystal hang out in the world, because what happens is it'll go feral and it'll cause some sort of environmental sort of destruction or hazard. But there have been some cases where there's been a crystal that resides in a town, and it will harness, and they've been able to harness the power effectively or whatever. But that goes, probably talk about that a little bit later. But that's sort of the gist of what the setting's about. Now, there are in the beginning, to kind of talk about the world itself. It's just called the world, and there are 5 lands is pretty much what the place is known as. They don't give the homeland a certain name, and they just call it the 5 lands or the lands. And it's pretty much like a big continent, and it's sort of like it looks like a big crescent in my opinion. And it's sort of, it's broken down. Yeah, it's broken down pretty. I think it's kind of interesting how they've broken it down, but it is kind of like very like anime in that sort of sense. And what I'm getting to is it's sort of a very JRPG sort of setting in that sense that where you got these 5 distinct lands, and each people is represented. In fact, each person, if you're from a different area, you actually get a different bonus to your attribute depending on where you're from.
All right, let me stop you for a second. What is a JRPG?
A JRPG in that is a Japanese RPG, the Japanese role-playing game. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the ones that came out on the old Nintendo systems and the old Sega, Sega Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and the Super Nintendo back in the day. And I think they probably did trickle on at the computer. I wasn't a computer player, but I used to play these JRPGs. And I'm thinking about like in terms like Final Fantasy and like Breath of Fire and all of those games. Did you ever check those out when you were a kid?
Yeah, I played Dragon Warriors a lot, and then Final Fantasy, mainly.
Yeah. So wouldn't you say this kind of has that kind of vibe to it?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the materia and Final Fantasy VII in the crystals, it's a little bit similar.
Yep. And I get a Final Fantasy VI vibe, because there's different, in that game, you hopped around from different place to place, and there was one land that was technologically savvy, one land that was sort of in the jungle that, sort of had that kind of vibe to it. And, there was different lands that had different atmospheres and stuff. And so that's kind of, your different, different vibes to it. And so that's kind of the feel that I got to this, where, in Crystal Heart, you go to Bogovia, and Bogovia is sort of like Transylvanian, and it's sort of like Raven, I guess Barovia, is that what you said? That's Ravenloft, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have to kind of like run D&D reference for me, because I'm like D&D kind of like, ignorant, and so I'm like, is that what's that? And so I'll so forget my knowledge about that. If it's super stuff, I know all about it, but the D&D I gotta lean on you.
It's all good. So after that introduction, they go right into character creation, and this looks like quite the meaty chapter there. There's quite a bit to it. Well, any major differences in making characters as the plain vanilla SWADE way of making characters?
What they do instead, if you start off playing as an agent of sin, and what's required as playing an agent of sin is, you have to pick where you're from. You have to pick a homeland, and depending on what homeland you're from, it's going to give you an attribute bump. So if you're from Bogovia, you're going to get an attribute boost to your strength. If you're from Fjordstad, which is sort of like the Scandinavia of the world, and it's kind of technologically savvy, you're going to get, a bump your smarts, and, just depending on where you're from. But also too, you're given 2 additional core skills instead of just the 5 that you get in SWADE. And that's fighting, and you get something called crystal channeling, which is your ability to, use your crystal powers. So that's a little bit different. They've also streamlined a couple of skills. They actually took academics and sciences folded in together, so it's all just academics, and they took repair and electronics and smashed those together, and so you have repairing, or not repairing, but engineering rather. And other than that, those are the only really differences that I see as far as like changing up SWADE a little bit.
Fair enough. And then, of course, everybody gets a special arcane background, right, to represent the use of the crystals.
That's correct, and that sort of comes in your crystal channeling skill. But yeah, that is your that is in fact your arcane background. It's the only one that they have in the game.
Good. All right. Edges and hindrances. Any of those that stood out for you that you think are pretty cool?
The hindrances are pretty. They don't really delve. They don't really break new ground as far as hindrances go. There's a couple of them that they kind of give you. They give you one as far as like your harness might give you some trouble down the road, and of course that's a major hindrance. Also, there's an interesting one. There's dependent, where somebody might be might be dependent on you for support. Like you might have a little kid with you, or you might have your old mom you might have to take care of. That also might fall into obligation. So that's not anything not anything really groundbreaking. Now, when we start talking about edges, though, that's a little bit different. They actually have a few edges that kind of like pique my interest, because they have these cultural edges that each person, each little realm wherever you live, they have these certain edges that kind of apply to your environment there, that I thought was kind of neat.
So basically, I mean, everybody plays human, right? But instead of species or races, you get cultures, and those help define your character a bit better.
Yep, that's a better way to describe it. And so, depending on where you're from, you might have these edges that are available to you, and these are actually different than the norm, because I mean we've talked about this before. It's easy to slap a +2 or a +1 or +2 on an edge, and you do see a little bit of that. But I do like the edges that are a little bit different from that sort of way of creating edges. The one that really stood out to me is, apparently if you're from the islands, you like to eat. You're sort of a gourmand, or you're sort of a foodie, so to speak. And there's one called Island Diet. And so if you're like living somewhere, or if you're on a mission somewhere for sin and you're away from the island, you still know how to find good food wherever you're at. And so you gain you're able to survive without food for like 2 days instead of 1 day, and before needing to roll for vigor, for hunger. And also too, what is it? You also get you could ignore one penalty for fatigue for the next hour after you feed some people. So I think that's kind of neat. As far as an edge goes.
A lot of flavor, no pun intended.
Oh, delicious. But and so they have these little unique sort of cultural edges, which I think gives a nice little spin to instead of like these different edges, or slapping a 1 or 2 on stuff. So
cool. Anything new regarding gear?
Gear? No, not really. The only thing that they've done with gear, and in fact, we'll talk about that later. But they have this whole mechanic called requisition, where you get this. You're allowed to. You're pretty much whatever starting gear that you want, you can pretty much have. And if you lose something, you just talk to Sin about it. But you do have to, you'd have to acquire like requisition points, and that's another form of currency. But there's not anything like too new with gear. But what's interesting though is it does sort of fall into that. It does. There is a lot of flavor in the aspect that you're going to get some fantasy gear, and you're going to get some like modern day, like maybe some sci-fi sort of looking stuff too, along with it. Like you carry around a sword, and you might have like some type of armor, but your team is equipped with this whole little it's essentially this like little Winnebago that's armored called the tank. So you're driving around with this this recreational vehicle, but you're carrying around a sword and maybe some chainmail too. So that's maybe a little bit different.
So step 5? I see something called team building. Well, what is that about?
This sort of now that you got it says right there in the book. Once you grab some agents together and you're ready to start playing, you can actually start. This is a good way to start like to sort of flavor interludes. You got a supervisor or whatever, and it's sort of their way in like using it for interludes. Like the team training is sort of like this little interlude sort of mechanic where you go in and you can draw a card, and it'll tell you if you draw spades, it might be you talk about some aspirations. If you go on, if you draw clubs, you talk about an enemy, and then what it recommends you do, you go on to the training session, which is sort of like a little it's a little like 1 hour. 1 hour prep session, or not really a prep session, but a 1 hour training session, for a lack of a better term, where you go in and you try out your new guy, or you try out your new character in a little maybe a small little adventure without your crystal, to check out how your character is before you get your crystal inserted into you. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I like it. That's a good idea. That way it fills in some of the blanks, creates some bonds between the characters and all that. That's cool. And then step 6, starter crystal. So you get to choose one, or you can make your own. How does that work?
Now, you can either choose a crystal, but there's I just want to let you know right now that there's 20 starter crystals. So what better way than to have a crystal start for you than rolling a D20? That's the best way I see to do it. But you can do that. But you either have the option to roll a D20 and see what your starter crystal is, or you can choose one, or you can in fact like make your own crystal. And they go into that a little bit later, but they kind of recommend, hey, we got some cool little starter crystals for you, because they started off with 20 novice crystals, and as you advance, you can get into higher crystals.
Oh, nice. And then finally, character archetypes. So are these like basically pre-gens that you can just pick one and you pick a crystal and you're good to go?
Yeah, for the most part, you could do that. I mean, there are some blanks that you have to fill in. There may be no, actually, there's not too many of them. They're they actually come complete with edges and hindrances, so you can grab one of these character archetypes and actually run with it. And what's interesting too is they've actually broken down the archetypes from the people of the 5 lands. So you actually have, if you want to play from somebody, if you want to run with somebody from Bogovia, you're like, all right, man, I want to play a Bogovian bog dweller. Well, here you go. Just slap a crystal on that dude, you're ready to go. Church acolyte, a Bogovian woodsman, put an axe in his hand, put a crystal in his hand, he's ready to go. And then it goes down to the other lands too. You have a Fjordstad engineer. And I imagine I'm saying that right, because that's sort of like reminiscent of a Scandinavian name. And if I don't pronounce that right, then Thor will strike me down for my Viking blood. So I better make sure I have it.
Yeah, you should.
Exactly. The islands is sort of a little unique place. So it's a lot of trading and a lot of commerce that goes on there. But also too, if you wanted to be a little foodie, they have a gastronome archetype. So that's kind of fun. Imagine, Gary running around, eating all the food, from the islands. That'd be kind of cool. Macia. Yeah, that's that's all it'd be. Macia, you have the skiff riders, and those guys, actually fly these big sort of like gliders and deliver mail and stuff. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, each sort of place is represented with its own special archetype. But what's also cool is if that's not your jam, they have sort of Crystal Hunter specific archetypes. Like you have the face character, you have the fighter, you have an infiltrator, you have an engineer and leader. So, but I'd say they did a really, really sweet job with the archetypes. That actually caught my eye when I was reading through that. If you're not sure what you want to play as, or you're not sure what your role in the game is, just look at one of these, and I think it's going to really kind of help you out there.
Nice. All right. Next chapter, Sin. So this is from what I can understand. I can glean from here is the basically the agency, how it works, and you mentioned the requisition mechanic earlier. So maybe explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is the organization that you work for. It's sort of this is the big group that all your players, this is the buy-in for you. This is why at the beginning too, which I thought was interesting, they talked about why would you work for Sin? And they give you some reasons why this is, you would do this. They sort of say it's the right thing to do. And Sin is, for the most part, trying to bring in these crystals and take care of the people. So, on the surface, they're doing it, they're doing the right thing. But it goes into like what the responsibilities are of being an agent. Like, don't do this, don't do that. The agent's code, make sure that you, don't start any trouble. Help when the authorities ask you to, go where you're supposed to go. But if you see something, make sure that you check it out, and make sure that you represent Sin, in the best manner. So that's sort of like the hero code. And
do they represent the law, or it's more like an explorer's type of agency?
It's sort of an explorer type of agency, but they're starting to get a little more prominence, where they're starting to be a little more recognized, and these local governments are actually starting to lean on them a little bit, or starting to like respect, or not so much, they're kind of respected and feared at the same time too. But Sin, they have this sort of like nebulous relationship with the rest of the world. They know that they're supposed to be doing a good thing, but some people, don't want them in their backyard. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they wield extreme power with those crystals, right?
Yeah, and they're the only ones doing it. So, I mean, that might raise some eyebrows, to some people. And so that's kind of where you're left. That's sort of where Sin's role in this setting is. They're supposed to, on the surface, they're taking care of the people, but how they're going about doing it, that's still a lot of questions left to be answered.
All right. Yeah, like I asked earlier, the requisition thing, because I like Ghostbusters. I like the Men in Black. And in these universe, basically you're an agent and you don't buy your own gear. You get gear from the agency. So it's basically requisition. Mm-hmm. Is that something that, even if you're not interested in this setting, you could use those rules for like any type of game where there's an agency and you need to requisition some equipment? How does it work?
Oh yeah, I really think that this is a neat little mechanic, especially if you don't want to do all the all the bean counting that a lot of times too. If you don't want to count how much something actually costs or anything like that too, this is another good little way to do it. The way requisition works is you actually accumulate it. Depending on like doing little missions and whatnot. So you'll get like a requisition point and a requisition score. So everybody starts off with a 1. And what you can do is you use it to get to buy gear down the road. Something, if something you lose, if you lose a sword, that's not a big deal. They're going to send you another sword. But if you want something, in the case like you want another crystal, or if you want, I don't know, if your tank blew up and you need another tank, you need something big, this is when you start using the requisition. And so what it wants you to do is, you can look through the gear and equipment table, and you can just go ahead and roll. It's just a regular skill check. And I think what it does is sort of, it uses the wealth mechanic from SWADE.
Okay.
And so it's just a regular skill check with this requisition roll, and then it can ace, and you do get a wild die with it, and you can actually spend bennies on it, and actually your teammates can sort of support you in that sense. Like if you needed something big, and one of your other players like, well, here, I'll go ahead and roll, my support roll, or my die to do that with, so they can help you do that.
Resources together, yeah. Exactly.
Now, here's the thing too. Like Sin, Sin will expect you to ask for something every once few weeks. Usually some minor thing or something, like maybe you need a first aid kit or whatever. If you're making more requests than you should, you'll start taking a penalty. Okay. So if you're just asking for everything under the sun, if you're asking, well, okay, all right, here, I got this one first aid kit, but I want to see if I can get a raise on it, and so I'm gonna keep trying it over. Then you can start applying penalties. So you're not just gonna let somebody like dip in the well way too many times on that.
Fair enough. So that leads into gear and equipment that you were talking about earlier, with a mix of kind of sci-fi and more fantasy type of gear. Any maybe name one or two pieces of gear that you thought was pretty cool.
The one that actually I got a chuckle at is the Bogovian charm mace. And the Bogovians are superstitious. If you think like these guys live in Transylvania, they got like different religion, different charms and whatnot hanging off of their equipment to ward off evil spirits. So what a charm mace is, it's like either a table leg or some sort of a table, or just whatever it is, whatever random item you can use as a blunt instrument, they grab, and then they like adorn it with like these little charms and like little effects. And then as long as you believe in it, you can whale the crap out of somebody with it.
Nice. So improvised weapons, but empowered.
Yes. Right. There's also, the island walrus is actually a pretty neat little item too. It's sort of like a double-bladed scythe, and you can spin that around, and you can really put something on somebody really quick. And also too, the Zingamayan, I don't know how to pronounce it. Zingamayan. There we go. Zingamayan whip is really neat, because whips are pretty cool, in and of itself. And so this one's not going to do it. Yeah, it's not going to do any extra damage, but you're going to, you tangle up somebody, they're not going to do anything with it. You wrap somebody up in that whip, what are they going to do? Nothing.
That's right.
That's right. So I thought that was pretty neat. They do have some, their grenades are actually kind of cool. They actually have like each little world has its own special grenade. Like there's the Bogovian like Papa Crash, which is a bunch of like a small bundle like pepper seeds, and you throw that and it'll blow up in somebody's face, and like the pepper powder will get in their nose, and they'll start distracting them, and then they'll it'll make them stunned if it goes off right. But each like little island has its own like little special grenade, so I thought that was kind of cool.
Nice. All right. Next chapter, the crystals and hearts. So this is where you find out everything about the crystals, their powers. What kind of power can we expect from a crystal? I just made a new character, and I'm going to pick a crystal, novice crystal. Well, what's in it? What kind of power do I gain?
What you can just taking a look at the crystals here, the novice crystals. What you can expect to happen is you can expect to get what they call a benefit, which a benefit is going to be an edge of some sort, some type. So you're going to get an edge right off the bat as soon as you slot that guy into your little chest harness there. You're going to get a new edge. And then, but see, it's also kind of double, it's double edged, because these crystals also manifest in power. You can also expect to get something called disposition, which is more often than not, it's going to be a hindrance. The crystal, because it manifests this great power, it also has, for lack of a better term, a personality, or what they call a disposition. So
like
as soon as you
sentient.
In a sense, I'd say that's correct. But what usually happens too is as soon as you pop that guy in there, you start taking on its personality traits or whatever it manifests. The case in point, there's a crystal that they use here quite a bit too. It's called like biosense or life sense or something to that effect. As soon as you slot that guy in, you're going to start feeling a lot more like cheery and like bubbly. So if that happened to you, Eric, I think you would be fighting it, constantly.
Yeah, I would want to trade it in.
Right. Yeah. You just the constant, the constant struggle of will between you and that crystal would just you couldn't even calculate it.
Yeah, I see that they also get a name, so it's kind of cute.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The crystal has its own name, so there's like these little, these little, little nice little names or little code names. You go down to the starter list, there's a handful of them. Yeah, Conscience Sense. It was Life Sense in the other one, but now it's called Conscience Sense. But yeah, each crystal has its own little code name, and it goes on.
The first one there, his name is Buddy. So yeah.
Yep. And with cool. Buddy, yep. So as soon as what happens with Buddy, and it's got a little theme. It talks about what Buddy's about, and Buddy's really, really being helpful to your friends, a supportive part of the team. You might want to see what Gary has to say about slotting Buddy into his chest, because maybe he'd be a lot more reliable. Oh well, no, that's one of the benefits there that you get. So you pop Buddy in your chest. You're going to be really helpful. You get the reliable edge, which means you're going to when you support people and you're when you do your support roles, you're gonna get a +2 for success and 3 with a raise. So that's so you get an edge, but also you get it kind of ramped up a little bit. But also too, you get the disposition that delusional. It's major. Everyone is nice. Even the most horrible person secretly wishes me the best. So you pop Buddy in it, and you instantly think that everybody loves you. But you also get a couple powers too. You also get boost trait, which means that you and a person agree on which trait you want to raise, and you can raise it, and all you got to do is roll a -1. And here's the thing, too, I guess we need to mention that the way that the powers work in this, it totally works on the no power points convention.
Okay.
You just take a -1 to whatever roll that you're doing, from your crystal channeling skill. So if you wanted to boost somebody straight, you take a -1 of that roll, you roll it. You and a buddy both boost that trait at the same time, as long as he's within smart's distance from you. And also, too, you can actually teleport to somebody when a friend is in need. If they need if there's something they can't do by themselves, or they're hurt in battle, you can make a -1 of that roll, and you teleport right to that dude. And also on a raise, and on a raise, you also appear with the right tool for that job. So if you have if dude needs a medical kit, you roll your buddy, boop, you're there with a medical kit. So that's pretty
nice. Sweet. I see that you can switch crystals, so you don't really get all that attached to them. Like, you can't keep the same one and improve it over time, advance your crystal. If you want more power, you need a new one. Is that how it works?
Yeah, crystals themselves, they don't grow in power over time. Okay. Like the buddy crystal isn't gonna improve. It's not gonna evolve like a Pokemon. What's gonna happen is you need to go into you need to look out for seasoned crystals. So when you start to get seasoned, you can start dipping into the seasoned style crystals. Now that's not to say if you're a novice you can't get a seasoned crystal. You're just gonna take a bigger penalty to those rolls. Okay. Where it might be a 1 and -1. Right now, with a novice being slotted with a novice crystal, but when you start slotting a seasoned crystal into a novice character, that's going to start becoming a -2 and a -3 penalty to your crystal channel rolls. But there you go. You have a list of a handful of seasoned crystals, and in the back they actually have some more crystals too. They actually talk about some veteran crystals and some. Even a handful of heroic crystals, which there's only a handful of those. And there's only 5 legendary crystals in the whole game, and that belongs to the 5 mysterious leaders of the lands. So,
cool.
They're so powerful that they don't even have them slotted. I mean, I'm not slotted, but they don't even have them statted out.
Yeah, it's more like a plot device type of crystals, basically.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Moving on to the next chapter, the 5 lands. So this is, from what I can see, like a gazetteer, but there's also the setting rules in there.
Yep. Now, you would actually be pleased at this too, because they don't do a whole lot of, the setting rules are not, they don't really blow away the game or anything like that too. All they're doing is just giving you different variations on like how to run like interludes.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
that's not
read the one about chasing leads. I thought that was pretty cool how you set up the beginning of a story of an adventure by drawing cards, and basically everybody in turn plays a part of the interlude, and then that helps set up the rest of the adventure.
Yep. Also, too, of course, the game is called Crystal Heart, so a lot of they changed. Where you will trigger an effect using a heart when you draw one of those instead of drawing a club sometimes. So that's a little bit different. There's no magic, and other than that, and then all it is just how to, hey, we got some suggestions on how to do like some interludes, and this is how we how we run a campaign. So if you want to do it like this, your season 1, season 2, season 3, it's how we break it down. It's also just it's sort of more suggestions than it is like hard and fast sort of we're going to change the game completely different than what it is.
Good. All right. And the Gazetteer, I mean, you already talked a bit about Bogovia and the islands, I think, but maybe just give an overview of the flavor of each land.
Sure. So Bogovia, like I talked about, is sort of Transylvania, sort of the Eastern Europe of the setting. People are kind of superstitious, and it's kind of boggy and marshy, and you gotta. I would imagine like if there's werewolves around, this would be the place where werewolves and vampires hang out. So everybody's kind of superstitious over there. So that's kind of the flavor that you would get from being from Bogovia. And if you're from there, you get a plus to strength. Now up north, you got Fjordstad, which is the Scandinavian sort of resembling land of this setting. And if you hang out from there, you're going to get a D6, or you're going to get a plus to your smarts. And it's pretty cold and frigid. But what's pretty interesting there is there's 11 cities that are actually up there in Fjordstad, and each sort of city represents like a different element of technology. Like there's a city of steam, there's a city of light, there's a city of I don't know, there's a city of like glass, and there's a city of like different lenses and sort of lens making and clockwork and whatnot. But what's funny too is these guys all fight against each other. There's always some sort of feuding, and some sort of noble houses, are bickering and this and that. Like our technology is better. We're actually, providing more service to for Fjordstadian cause or whatever. But they have all this technology, and yet they can't agree amongst themselves. That's sort of the big shtick with Fjordstad. You go to the islands. That's in the center of the continent, and it's just a series of small broken down small islands and archipelagos and and all that other words that I forget from 4th grade geography. Like peninsula and archipelago.
Presque
Yeah, where the hell that is. But this is sort of like reminiscent of the Pacific Islands. There's a lot of people wear like lei and have flowers in their hair, and they wear floral patterns and stuff. And but that's where you go to eat, apparently, man, because all these guys like cooking and stuff. So that's
barbecues on the beach, and
a lot of luau's and stuff. I don't know if it's not Hawaii specific, but if you imagine, there's a lot of barbecues and stuff on the beach, and and probably some music going on. But
hungry, man.
I'm about to go get me some barbecue, dude. That sounds really, really, really good. But and then right to the west, we start creeping into the west of the continent, and it's a land called Macia, and I think that's how you pronounce it. It's got a lot of vowels, but I'm just going to say that that's Macia. If I'm wrong, somebody will correct you, I'm sure. So in this area, it reminds me of sort of like the plain, like North America, the plains area. And the people there are sort of, reminiscent of like Native Americans. And I also want to say like the Mongols, that they're very tribal and they migrate from place to place. But also too, what I found interesting about these guys is they end up, they're very structured in the sense that the clans will ask, well, not so much ask, but they have these set roles in place. And if somebody has to, they expect like a certain person to fill that role. For instance, if you're, I don't know, if you're a weapon maker, and the person who's been making weapons for years and years and years was a fat dude with a beard, but you're the best, but the best candidate is a skinny woman, is a skinny woman with no beard, then she's going to have to like gain some weight or like put on heavier clothes and probably like adorn herself with like some kind of fake beard.
Okay.
So it's more like upholding like like these standards and these, these traditions more so than just, and I guess that's sort of their appeal is that, they have, that's what's going to save them, or that's what sort of, makes them is these, preservations and, preservations of cultures or whatever. So that's the big thing. So that's the big thing about the Macians. And then you have Zingama. Zingama is the southernmost, is the southwesternmost, I guess, area in the lands. And it's a jungle nation. And it's sort of reminiscent of like the Amazon and like Africa and some, heavily jungle lands. But what's interesting about Zingama is the only area of this world that has a unified government. And also too, this is, I would imagine all the hipsters would live in Zingama because they're always hip to like, the latest, trends and fads and everything like that. And that stuff changes like, day and night. That there's always something new to find out, something new to discover. And also too, these guys are also known for partying quite a bit. These guys like to party and they like to expand their minds. And also too, they like their sports. This is where you come for like to watch the, watch wrestling and like cage fighting and stuff. So this is like I would say this is like the extreme nation. If, these guys like their extreme sports, they like to drink and they like to party. So.
It'd be pretty difficult to choose between the islands and that place, huh?
Yeah, that's the thing too. Yeah, if you like to party, man, I think Zingama is the country that doesn't sleep. That's where you go to have a good time. And I think you go to the islands if you want to just chill. But if you want to, so it's sort of like, do you want to go to Rio to hang out and party, or do you want to go to Fiji and chill?
What about Vegas?
Vegas, yeah, man. That's I think Zingama. I think Vegas would be in Zingama.
Yeah, I think so.
They had that there, so I think you're right.
Awesome. Next chapter, adventures. So running the game, tips, advice, that type of thing, right?
Yeah, and sort of, they go in what's going to classify as a decent game. They tell you, throw lots of bennies out at the game, which I think that's just a good policy anyway, though, in Savage Worlds. Give only one plot. Don't overload, the game with a bunch of different, leads. Just have one sort of standard plot.
Simples.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just I'm sorry, man. I keep on cutting you off.
Oh, sorry.
Just creating a bunch of adventures. Here's some things you might want to try, like some, unusual combat stuff you might want to check out. Also, too, they get into something that is really, really interesting is how to game master Sin, how to portray Sin as, inside your game. And that's sort of the, and this is what kind of drew me to it, because on the surface, I did think that this was a little cartoony at first. It was sort of like very much a Saturday morning cartoon, like we're going to find the crystal. But no, you start delving a little bit farther into it, and it's like, oh, okay, this can be an organization that might not necessarily have the people's best interests at heart. And that, I think that sort of appeals to me as a game master. Wouldn't you say? That's always an interesting trope, that the people you work for aren't necessarily the best sort of guys.
Yeah, delving into gray morality a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it breaks down to that you can actually have Sin. It actually talks about ways that you can make Sin, portrayed as the main antagonist, which that's pretty, that's pretty awesome. Where you actually you actually work for this big globalist power, and all they're trying to do is consolidate power. And I don't ever think that's a good thing. That's not anything that's I'd be happy working with. And then it goes in to say that you can start using your supervisors and mentors, which in the back of the book they actually give a list of a few NPC that you can use as these supervisors and mentors, and these guys always provide nice little seed for adventures. Somebody a supervisor might be having trouble, or a mentor might be having something going on, and you can always use that as a seed to throw your players somewhere. So that's kind of nice. It talks about the little training sessions that you go into and just different campaign seeds. And, there's a handful of them. But also, too, it breaks down, like, what are the crystals really? It will go into what the up to four players guys, considered the crystal to be in canon. But then it also gives about 4 or 5 other different, like, ideas for what the crystals really are. I would go into those a little bit more, but I kind of don't want to spoil them for you. I think they're pretty neat. I think that's kind of what, when I was still sort of I wasn't on the fence, but I was like, okay, this is all right. This is all right. This is right. Then when I got to that part, this is when it started piquing my interest a little bit, because I'm not interested in black and white stuff is fine. But, if you can make things a little more gray or a little more nebulous for the player, I think that's a little more interesting as a storyteller.
Yeah, I think it adds depth to a story, make it feel more, I don't know if real is a good word, but at least more real.
Yeah. You're going to get more buy-in out of your players, too, if it's not just, some Mary Sue type of reason. I'm going to do this because it's the best thing to do. Oh, screw that. Go play with G.I. Joes, if that's the case.
All right. So, after that is what the plot point campaign. So an 8-episode long plot point campaign. Obviously, we don't want to reveal any spoilers here, but have you looked into that one?
Yeah, actually I did. I started reading it. I'm always fascinated with plot point campaigns because I like the way that they're structured. And always it's sort of like reading a script. If you're like a movie buff, you like to take a look at scripts, which I have before. And that's why I like looking at the plot point campaigns, because I like to see how each person like takes a whack at them. And I really like the way that this one was broken down, because if you really delve into it, and like I said, I don't want to spoil it too much, you get a deeper understanding is sort of like where sin lies, and where, more what kind of the true story of Crystal Heart is kind of about. So if you were to play this little plot point campaign, I think you have a pretty good idea about what Crystal Heart, what sin, and the whole world, entails. I would think this would be a good one to run if you decided to jump in there and do it.
Nice, yeah. Does it kind of change how the world is after you finish it? Like if you play the Flood for Deadlands, at the end of it, I mean, there's big natural disaster. Is there a world-changing event at the end of this plot point?
What sort of happens is you get an idea of like who the bigger players are, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If that makes sense, you sort of get the idea that, like what sin is going to use the organization for, and what sin is, what length sin is going to go to maintain their sinness.
Their sinness. Yeah, to not spoil anything.
Right.
And finally, last chapter, there's an appendix. Well, appendices. There's 2 of them, but the last one is adversaries and challenges. So basically a bestiary, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, you get a pretty cool bestiary, man. And just like you said, if you like the artwork in here, this is where some of it sort of really takes off. You go through here and you can take a look, and it sort of breaks down like if you're going to hang out in Bogovia, this is some stuff that you're going to have to worry about in Bogovia. Here's some people that you might have to watch out for. Same thing with Fjordstad, the islands, Macia, and Zingama. But also too, it starts breaking down sort of the animals and the other things that you got to go into. And the animal, I think that, of course, you got wolves you got to worry about. And what's funny is they reference wolves, Bogovia. I think wolves are like a bigger problem than like tornadoes are in the South. Bogovia, they're like a huge natural disaster. So yeah, you got to watch out for the wolves there. But you start looking into some of these other animals, and all right. In all honesty, I was thumbing through this, and everything was cool up until the point I got to the Sisyphean bear, and I almost lost it because I thought this was the funniest damn thing that I'd seen in a while. I'm sitting here thumbing through. It's a bear it's a grizzly bear that picks up a little tree and tries to hide behind it. That's what it does. It picks up a tree that it's easily bigger than, and it stays in a position long enough for some like little animal to walk by. And it's like, don't see me. And then as soon as it walks by, snatch, it grabs something. But yeah, that's what this bear does. It carries this tree all the way up a hill and waits for an animal to come by. But the tree is easily, it's like a twig to him. And so I thought that bear's kind of cool. Or dumb, I don't know, but I just
that's like you. That's like you trying to hide behind me, right?
That's pretty much it. Like me taking you and like nobody see me, and then waiting for a pizza to come by.
Nice. Crystal manifestations. What's that?
So when the crystals are out there in the wild and they're feral, they have a theme that's sort of like that influences the environment, and so this is sort of like. They call them frames, but I would call them more like flare-ups or whatever. Like if you have a crystal that represents lightning, you're going to have something. You're going to have like these little lightning like bursts that like kind of hang out and like almost gain. I wouldn't say that they're not so much sentient, but they are kind of like aware. That they're sort of like a fire. Like fire will light. Will emanate from a crystal that like projects fire, and sort of like hovering in the air. They're almost like little like fire wisps or fire whites, or or like manifestations of the crystal they're in, if that makes sense.
Okay, in that area. So whenever you're in that area, like if it's a fire-based feral one, there's probably going to be dancing flames around protecting it. Do they have some kind of agenda, or they just hang out?
No, they just hang out, just doing what they would expect. The fire ones are going to let stuff on fire. If you go to a dream crystal, it's going to go ahead and try to enter your mind, and let you know what's going on. If there's one that's depressed, it's just going to sit around and mope all the time. That's what
and those are the crystals that you have to bring back to Sin. Is that it?
Yep. Yeah, these feral crystals, pretty much any crystal that's out in the wild, that's what you want to go ahead and do. That's pretty much what you're tasked to do anyway. This one's hanging out in a cave, and it's causing all these, these, I don't know, dream disruptions. If there's this dream crystal and everybody's having these nightmares, you're going to go in that cave and you're going to go ahead and find that crystal, but you're going to find these like little, frames that they call them, which are, these little manifestations, little physical manifestations of that crystal, and they might attack you. So that's something to expect.
All right. Touched creatures. What's that?
Well, this is a creature that's been crystalline by some reason, just through the environment. The crystals have touched like some sort of creature, and they have really made it worse. In the sense that they've mutated it, and they've and it goes down, and it'll actually tell you what kind of abilities it'll grant these creatures. You actually can roll a d20, and it can tell you exactly what it's going to do. Like if you roll a 20 on one of these things, the creature might be talkative. It'll take time to discuss things, and it's either menacing or humiliate. So you might get you might run into a squirrel that's going to just embarrass the hell out of you.
Last thing you want to happen.
I get that enough at home, man. I don't need a squirrel telling me, how much of a loser I am already. So yeah. I'm already getting mad at that squirrel, dude.
Yeah, I don't want a snake called Gary telling me I have no friends,
Right. It'd be a big snake. But that's sort of what it's about. Like you find a creature out in the world, and you can give it one of these sort of crystal touched abilities. I mean, they're not just talkative, but there's cold, there's big, there's explosive. Like explosive squirrel, I don't want an explosive squirrel like hanging out by me either.
Well, maybe if they're flying, that'd be awesome.
Weeps. Yeah, I don't like squirrels, man. They're kind of scary, but that's what. Yeah, that's essentially what those creatures are. And then
no, go ahead.
no, but what they also have too is they have these creatures that are just straight up corrupted, and these are like almost like big, like bigger creatures. Like they have something called a livestock horror, which is pretty much like you smash a cow, or actually a horse, a sheep, a cow, a pig, a goose, just everything all smashed together, and watch that sucker come at you. Yeah.
Yeah, that ought to do it. I'm out.
Yeah, I'm done, man. I'm done. As soon as I see a goose smashed with something else, screw that. I'm out.
Especially a goose, yeah.
I don't like those things, man. I don't like most friggin'.
My mom had two, and every time I'd come home to visit, they'd just give me the evil eye, and you got to watch out. You got to watch your back.
Geese are evil, man. They always bite me. I got stories about me and geese, man. I got to go to therapy about me and geese, man. I don't like them.
Geese PTSD.
Pretty much. But as soon as you get past that scary nonsense that's going to haunt my dreams for the rest of my life, that livestock horror, you go into more crystals. They actually have more crystals that you break down and take a look at. They actually get into the seasoned crystals and more veteran crystals. And then at the very end here, you actually get to take a look at some heroic crystals. You know, there's just a handful of those. So those are big time right there. If you get you get a hold of one of those, it's a big day for everybody.
Nice. And then you mentioned it earlier, like more supervisors and mentors. Yep. Can throw in. How do you use that? What are these for exactly?
Well, these are just sort of like NPCs. If you want to have like an NPC, I don't know if you do this, but I've done this a time or two in a game where you have like an NPC sort of like be, Johnny Q exposition. Tell everybody what's going on. You can use one of these supervisors as sort of, sort of somebody like transmission, gives them all the information, sort of like the point of contact within the organization.
Gotcha.
If you're James Bond, this is, these guys like either M or Q, sort of the best way I can describe it. And, in that way you got, and also too, if you pick somebody from Bogovia, you have a good reason to talk like this in accent, Yeah.
The Russian / Transylvanian accent. Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, I mean, first thing I'd say impressions from this is that it looks, one word I would use for this setting is complete. Like they didn't forget anything that I would need to run a game in that setting. I mean, granted, it's 200 pages, so but yeah, I mean, you got everything in there, including the plot point campaign, a big bestiary, tips on how to run the game. You got pre-made crystals, pre-made NPCs, everything's covered. Nice.
Yep. Yeah, it pretty much ticks off a lot of boxes as far as like settings go. You get like you get all these pre-gens. You don't have to delve into another book to run it. It's not like you need the Superpowers Companion or the Sci-Fi Companion or something else to run it. Everything's right there.
You don't need 9 books to run that like another.
No, right? Yeah, you don't need 9 books and wait on another book for that to run. Yeah, like another setting.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just get a little. I'll get a little choked up when I get some things I mentioned. Allergies is what it is.
Yeah, it's that time of year.
Mm-hmm. But that's what really appealed to me is you didn't. I mean, there's going to be more stuff coming down the pike. Like Up to 4 Players is going to make this book. I think it's going to be called like The World of Sin or like Living Within Sin or something, which little clever title. But where it's going to go a little bit more into like sin as an organization. But you really, I mean, you don't really need to wait on anything. You can just pick this up and go.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah. Just when I went and picked this up on sale, just sort of like, I'll take a look at it and everything. And I was expecting a lot more of this to be sort of a Saturday morning, sort of like cartoon, cutesy, well, that's fun for the kids and everything. And don't get me wrong, that's great. That's great if that's what it's intended for. I think this is a good, it can be that. It can be a great introduction to Savage Worlds if you got kids that you want to get started in the hobby and everything. But what made me like this a little bit more is it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be regulated to as a kid's game. You don't have to play it as, Mary Sue is vanilla, as you want to. It actually has a lot. Has a lot more depth than I thought it would be. And that's sort of on that strength. That's what sort of makes me recommend this. Is it doesn't have to be, Saturday morning cartoon. It could be something a little more, a little more realistic or a little more, grounded, so to speak.
Nice. How many crystals out of 10?
I give it 8 crystals out of 10. Nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, Uncle Jay, thank you, man. I mean, I'm particular with my settings too, but yep. Listening to you, I'm willing to give this a try. I mean, it looks pretty good.
Yeah. It's not for everybody. Here's the thing. If you're used to playing one sort of game, it might not be for everybody. But here's the thing. This sort of harkens back to those Final Fantasy games that I used to play, like the Dragon Warriors and all those other stuff. And I've never seen anything like that in a tabletop RPG. So that's sort of sung to me. And so that's why I was willing to check it out. And yeah, and if you want to check out something a little bit different, I actually recommend this very, very much.
All right. Well, again, thank you for doing this, for saving my skin this month. You keep reading. Maybe I'll just buy you some books so you can read it and do my job.
Oh, no problem, man. Just send me whatever. Just as long as it's not like actual like workbooks. I don't want to read those. I don't read the ones that I got.
All good. So yeah, listeners, hope you enjoyed this. Hope it made you want to pick it up if you don't have it and play it. And we'll see you guys around soon for our regular episode coming up. We're going to be talking about swag.
Ooh.
All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
The Wild Die Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of their respected owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Die Podcast.